It's been a while since I've talked about Billy Corgan's NWA, and that's because, well, I haven't seen or heard from them in what feels like forever. And that's because despite getting this new deal with the CW, the NWA are probably at their least relevant since Billy Corgan took over, and we're going to look into all the reasons why, and actually take a dive into what a current day NWA Powerr episode looks like. So like the video and subscribe, and let's check in with the National Wrestling Alliance. So ever since Billy Corgan became owner of the NWA, I'd say there's kind of been 5 different eras of the NWA. Corgan bought the NWA in 2017, and from there until 2019, I call the pre-Powerr era, back before NWA Powerr had been created and they weren't broadcasting shows everywhere, but there was stuff going on with Nick Aldis and Cody Rhodes and of course at All In, and it was the precursor to late 2019 until mid 2020 when we had the prime Powerr era, as this was when the first season of NWA Powerr was airing before the pandemic struck and they got taken off the air. Easily the best era of Billy Corgan's NWA, Powerr was a brilliant show during this time. You had Nick Aldis as world champion, the introduction of Strictly Business, Thunder Rosa, Ricky Starks, Eddie Kingston, Allison Kay, James Storm, Mr. Anderson, and so many more great talents were on this show. But of course the pandemic struck and they went off the air, and they returned in 2021, and I'd say from there until late 2022 was the post-pandemic era, where you had stars from the first season of Powerr still around, as well as some new people coming in and some decent stuff going on, like NWA Powerr, their all-women's pay-per-view, but also some questionable stuff going on, like Tyrus being the TV champion and Nick Aldis, as well as many other stars' departures. And then from there until late 2023 is the Hell era of NWA. Most of their big stars are gone, Tyrus is the world champ, and the Sinister Minister is snorting booger sugar on pay-per-view. Then from late 2023 until now is the CW era, as NWA Powerr now airs exclusively on the CW app, rather than on YouTube like it previously was, and I feel like they've really paid the price taking full episodes off YouTube, because nowadays I hardly ever hear about the NWA, and looking at their YouTube views, they are drastically lower than compared to before when they were broadcasting full episodes on the platform. And losing a lot of their big stars means the full matches that they do post nowadays aren't doing very well, because people like Nick Aldis and everyone that came after him, and Kamille, who was really the last person still around who was a big draw for YouTube views before they left to the CW, she also left. Matt Cardona was also great for this, but he is no longer a regular and only makes sporadic appearances, and NWA milk that as much as they can, and I don't blame them because it draws way more than whatever else they're uploading with others from their roster. And the NWA roster isn't bad, but is definitely depleted compared to how it used to be. No more do we see the likes of Nick Aldis, Kamille, Cardona, Thunder Rosa, Ricky Starks, Allison Kay, Eddie Kingston, and it shows. I would say the best part of NWA is their women's division. Is definitely not the strongest women's division out there, nor the strongest the NWA women's division has been, but it is carried by Kenzie Page, who is a really good worker and a strong worker, and she's stuck around with the NWA for a few years now and is their current women's champion. She's very good like I said, but issue is, when you look at her, you just can't help but think she'd be way better off in an NXT or even a TNA or just elsewhere. And that's an issue that will unfortunately always persist with the NWA, which is that they are just a stepping stone promotion. Eventually, their biggest stars get signed elsewhere. We saw it with all the names I mentioned before, and you can't help but think it's inevitable with a few of these people on the NWA roster that they're just going to go off and get signed elsewhere. I have seen that NWA are making efforts to sign down some of their talent to exclusive contracts, but with the exception of a few of them, such as Max the Impaler, Colby Corino, and maybe Natalia Markova, I'd say the people they're signing down, while they aren't bad, they're not game changers, and it's not like other promotions are in competition trying to sign them. And you can't help but notice that names like Kenzie Page and their world champion EC3 haven't been announced as signing contracts, and that's not a good sign. Speaking of which, EC3, he's their world champion, and he's one of the few people on the roster with some semblance of name value, but he's obviously nothing like the old TNA EC3, and we're actually going to watch one of his matches as we review the most recent episode of NWA Powerr, which he featured on. He's another name I can't see sticking around forever in the NWA. I think this is maybe one of the best spots he's going to get. I don't see him being signed back to TNA or a WWE or an AEW. Maybe TNA could happen, but even I still don't see EC3 sticking around with the NWA. Even I think he's above the NWA. But anyway, let's jump into this episode of NWA Powerr, which is actually part 5 of their Crockett Cup event, which, if you don't know, is their yearly tag team tournament, which they usually do as a big pay-per-view event. But nowadays, it seems as though NWA Powerr aren't doing pay-per-view events anymore, and rather just splitting them up into multiple parts of Powerr episodes, which to me is just lazy and surely has to be cost-cutting measures, because why else would they be doing this? Surely this isn't beneficial to them, and surely it's better to have it as a standalone pay-per-view, but whatever. The Crockett Cup, like I said, is their yearly tag team tournament. It used to have some prestige to it, but they kind of just give it to anyone now, and hey, it doesn't even get its own pay-per-view event anymore. But the finals will be taking place on this show tonight, but we open with the NWA Women's Tag Champions Charity King and Danny B defending their belts against Tiffany Nieves and Rika Tahaka. No entrances for anyone as the match just begins immediately, and the crowd open with a "This is Wrestling" chant, and then are just dead for the rest of this match, including for when the two powerhouses are going at it, and like I said, for the entirety of the match. It's a fine tag match though. B and King pick up the win in a match that did go a little too long, but that's only because these are all big event matches being re-shown on a weekly 45-minute show. So, spoiler alert, every match on this show kind of drags a bit because of that, especially with no segments or angles or packages or anything in between the matches. It's just match, match, match. Anyway, it's Sam Adonis, who is the brother of Corey Graves and a wrestler in Mexico, challenging EC3 for the world title. The crowd of what looks to be maybe a couple hundred at most are a little louder for this match, but even still, you could probably hear a pin drop for chunks of this match, and this match was once again fine. Watchable. I mean, that's all there really is to say about NWA matches, because for the most part, they all kind of work the same basic and slower paced, unexciting style. Yeah, I guess it's watchable, but you're never seeing really anything new with the NWA. The story of this match was that they were kind of trying to out-heel each other, so at least this match at least had something about it, and EC3 of course picks up the win to retain his title. Anyway, up next is the Immortals versus the Southern Six in the Crockett Cup finals. And this was a decent tag match, I thought, probably the best match of the show, and the crowd were definitely the most invested. I've seen them all night, and I imagine this was the main event of the night that it took place. The story of this match was that the two big guys were just being out-heeled by the two smaller guys who were doing anything they could to be able to beat them and outsmart them. There was a crazy spot at the end where Kratos dove out the ring onto security, and he was then taken out, and then Alex Taylor rolled up Odinson after a ref bump and a low blow to win the match in the ring, as himself and Kerry Morton became the winners of the Crockett Cup 2024. And yeah, this was decent stuff, and overall I'd say it was an average to okay episode of NWA Powerr. A shame it's so damn hard to watch and only available on a mobile app in the US. This CW deal, unless they're making decent money from it, is doing NWA no favors. They were far more hot when they were on YouTube, where they have their actual audience. NWA were actually meant to get a CW TV deal, but fumbled it due to the Sam Hain incident, and of course, WWE got the TV deal for NXT instead, and the NWA were effectively relegated from a TV deal to just having a deal with the app where it airs on the app. And I don't see it as beneficial to the NWA whatsoever, like I said, unless they're getting money from it. I know the app also has an NWA reality show and a Billy Corgan reality show which came with the deal, and cool, I guess. I Once again, don't see how this helps the NWA, and I hope you're getting paid decent money for it, because right now, I don't think I've seen the NWA any more cold than it is right now. Genuinely, I think the only thing they can do to even try to grow their audience again is to get back on YouTube, where most of their audience actually is, and start bringing in names that are proven draws on the platform. I have no idea how long this CW deal is and what the future for the NWA will hold, but I sure as hell can't see them ever reaching the heights they did during the first season of NWA Powerr, and it just feels like a completely different show now, and like they've been regressing every year since then. Guys, that's it from me though. Leave a like on this video if you did enjoy. I'll see you all in the future. Goodbye, and keep on rolling.